record. There we go. All right, so good morning and welcome to this last webinar for the year where we will be talking about graphic design basics. We're going to be taking a bit of a break. We will be back towards the end of January with our next webinar, which is on printing Excel spreadsheets. But today, graphic design basics. So I'm not a graphic designer, however, I do a lot of presentation design, and I've been doing that for sort of 10-15 years now. And what I've found is I've learned a few little tips and tricks that help my work look a little less ungraphic designed, if that makes sense. So if you think of graphic design as being on a spectrum, you've got like really top designers, you've got Nancy D'Artes, you've got people like that all the way up here, and then down the bottom you've got us mere mortals. So we've got these people with no graphic design experience. So there is this whole spectrum here, and hopefully by the end of the day I'll help you move you away a little bit. So I'm not going to be able to make you a top graphic designer. Sorry if you were looking for a career change, but what I will hopefully do is help your work look less undesigned, if that makes sense. So there's some really quick tips that you can use to follow. Because we're all doing graphic design today, whether you give a presentation or whether you're designing a report or even doing something like a chart, you are doing graphic design. And the tools that you have available to you through the Microsoft Office suite and others they're really quite powerful. So I find PowerPoint to be an incredibly powerful graphic design tool, but those tools are also available if you're doing something like a newsletter, for example. Then Word, you can get pretty complex with that. You don't have to go into InDesign if you don't have the money or the skills to do so. Let's get started then, shall we? So today we're going to be looking at, I'm going to talk you through some sort of basic principles, some, as I say, some quick tips. So we'll talk about crap design, and we're going to talk about the rule of thirds, we're going to talk about the use of color, that sort of thing, and then we're going to have a look at some ways that you can get inspired as well. So I've got some of my sort of inspiration-y postcards and things that I use here, but I've also got some resources, online resources that you could look at as well. Okay, so let's get going, shall we? I'm just going to turn my video off for a moment. There we go. And let's just quickly go and have a look at this. All right. So let's have a talk through some design basics. First thing I want to talk to you about is crap design. Okay, so CRAP stands for contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. This is from a book by a woman called Robin Williams called The Non-Designer's Design Handbook, which is one of my favorite books about graphic design. I do believe that it's available in our library. So yeah, it's called The Non-Designer's Design Handbook. There's also a Non-Designer's Design Workbook. And she has a great style and it's really simple to understand, and there's lots and lots of practical examples where she shows you sort of before and afters and things going through the stages of design as well. So from, if you think about that spectrum, she takes things from that very sort of low end of the spectrum and pushes them up and shows you how you can do that too. So it's a fabulous book. I highly recommend it. So the Non-Designer's Design Handbook by Robin Williams. So crap design. What on earth is crap design? Now, once you understand what crap design is, you will see it everywhere. You will start to notice it all over the place. And the little postcards I showed you, those postcards you can pick up from the market and from cafes and so on around Adelaide. You'll find that you'll really be able to spot the crap design happening there. So crap design, what is that all about? Contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Okay, so let's talk about these one by one. So first of all, contrast. So contrast is about the fact that our eye is drawn to what is different. Okay, so our eye is certainly drawn to anything that is different. That's the way that our brains work. So what that means is that you can draw people's eye to something by using contrast. And you also want to make sure that you are not drawing people's eye to the wrong thing by poor use of contrast. So you'll notice something like this graph. I'm using color to draw attention to one particular bar. So your graphs and things, they don't have to be all multicolored, they don't have to be single tone. You can make sure that you're using something, using contrast, in this case color contrast, to draw attention to what it is that you want to talk about. Size is another way that you can do it as well. So you might see this around, if you've got a sentence of text on your PowerPoint slide, or you've got maybe a headline in a report, or a little sidebar in a report, you can use size to draw attention to the important words. Now you have to be careful. You don't want to be drawing attention to sort of half the words. That's not going to look very good. And also, when you change your font, there's no point changing a 24-point font to a 26-point font. No one's going to notice that other than people like me, and it'll just look a bit weird. It'll just look a bit off. So if you're going to do it, do it. Yeah. And just so you know, with the drop downs in Microsoft Office, the drop down, I think it goes up to 96. You can type any number you want in that font box. So you can type 300 and hit enter, and you can get some really nice big fonts. So size is a way of doing it as well. And obviously you can do that with images and other things as well as just text. Okay. And font, so you can actually draw attention to something by using a different font. So fonts have their own character. They are made up of characters, but they also have their own character. And so you want to be careful with your use of fonts, but it can be a very powerful way of drawing people's eye to something. Now, you don't want to go overboard with this, but for example, when I talk to people, I have a presentation I do about presenting, and one of the things there is, are you nervous or are you excited? Let me give you a hint, you're excited, you're not nervous. And with that, I use a font that's called Shattered because, it's about that kind of nervous energy. And so that works quite well for that. But what you don't want to do is have different fonts. I'm not talking about having a different font on every screen here. You should use one, maximum 2 fonts. There's a trend to have a different title font, a different body font. Certainly the university templates have that. But fonts can be used just to draw attention to something if you want to. But make sure it's a font that meets the character of what it is that your message is. Remember, it's all about helping get your message across. Okay. So that's contrast. So remember, contrast is about drawing people's eye to, that people's eyes drawn to what's different. So you can choose what you want to draw people's eye to. One thing you can do is sort of close your eyes. Coco Chanel used to say this, you should turn around and look yourself in the mirror. The thing that your eye is drawn to first, you should remove. Anyway, so it's a bit like that with your graphic design. If you sort of walk away from your graphic design, come back, look at it with fresh eyes. What is your eye drawn to first? And is that what you really intend it to be drawn to? Okay. Okay. So repetition. Repetition is not about having your logo on every slide. Repetition is about making everything look like it comes from the same source. Okay. So it's really about making sure there's a kind of theme, if you like. So repetition can be things like the use of colour. So we have a colour template at the university, and we use that in all sorts of things. And we have a set of colours for staff. We have a set of colours used for student communications. And these are, it just really helps to make things branded, if you like. So this repetition stuff is sort of around that branding piece. So you can use repetition of fonts, use repetition of color. You can also use repetition, think about repetition in terms of things like, does my poster, does my handout, does my presentation, do they all look like they've come from the same place? They all look like they've got the same message going on. So that's kind of the thing about repetition. So say it's not just about having your logo on every slide or things like that. I've seen great presentations that have done things like repeated repeated puppies. So every slide has got a puppy and they're all saying different things, but they've used that sort of subtler repetition. You also have repetition in things like shapes. So, if you use square shapes somewhere in your presentation or somewhere in your newsletter or what have you, just make sure that you continue to use square shapes. Don't mix it up too much. Use that repetition. Okay. Next, we come to alignment. So our brains like things to be lined up. We feel that things that are scattered about are, they're not logical. We like to have that nice, neat flow. I think we certainly feel that things are better thought out if they are lined up. So our brains like things to be lined up. It makes them a little bit crazy if they're not. So unless your message is about things being scattered and confused, that's different. But in general terms, you want to make sure that you are using alignment. Okay. And centering alignment, by the way, is like the laziest type of alignment. You'll notice that most designers don't often use that centered alignment. Now, while I'm on this screen as well, I'd just like to point out something else that you can really easily spot in a non-designer's work. So designers use a lot of what we call white space. So in this case, the white space is actually a black color. So you can probably see over on the right-hand side of the screen, there is lots and lots of blank space. So that's white space. This allows your design to breathe, and non-designers are terrified of white space. So they will fill that. They will make the font bigger. They will go, let's find a piece of clip art and put it there, and they just don't like it. But actually, it really helps with your design. It makes it look a lot more grown up, if you like, to have that white space there. As I say, it gives your design space to breathe. It gives your message space to breathe. And actually, when you start to think about things like cognitive load, you want to make sure that you don't have too much information. And you certainly don't want to have any unnecessary information. You don't want clutter, because people can only take in so much information at once. And so you want to make sure that you're really focusing on the information that you want them to take in. So just putting a pretty picture is not going to help. Okay? Relevant pictures can help, but irrelevant pictures do not help. Okay, so that's that little bit about white space. But yeah, so that's all about alignment. Now, when we talk about alignment as well, we don't necessarily just mean alignment on a single page. What we can also mean is alignment from slide to slide to slide, or alignment from page to page within your report. Now, designers often work with a thing that's called the grid. And the grid is really a way that they lay things out. And what the grid says is, so this is like quite a simple grid, 3x3 grid you can see on there. And essentially what use of the grid would mean is I could fill a space. Like I could fill, say, 2 of those blocks with a paragraph of text. I could go vertically, I could go horizontally. I could fill 6 of those blocks. I could fill all 9. I could fill 3, then leave a gap and then fill 2 on the other side. But I always have to make sure something's within a block. So I can't go over 1.5 of the grid. Okay. So that's working to a grid. You will see that a lot in magazines. So think about how you might have 3 columns in a magazine, and you'll have a picture that goes over 2 of those columns, or something like that. So you'll see that a lot, or in annual reports and those sorts of things. So think about that when you're writing things like newsletters or any other sort of long form document. It can be really handy to work with the grid. Okay. There are whole books about the grid. I've covered that quite briefly there. Let's move on. But yeah, once you notice the grid, you'll see it all over the place. Okay, so that's around alignment. And finally, we come to proximity. So proximity is about the fact that our brains presume that there is a relationship between things that are close together, and there is no relationship between things that are far apart. Okay, so you need to make sure that within your design you are grouping things together that are meaningful as a group. Yeah? So things that are related to each other, and you are leaving some space between things that are not related to each other. So if you think, for example, about a business card, on a business card, you've probably got things like you have someone's name and their job title and perhaps their institution, and that'll be in a little block together. Then you'll have lots of space, and then you'll have things like their address blocks, so their physical address, their email address, or nowadays, you know, their Twitter handle, their LinkedIn profile, things like that, and their mobile number, and you'll have those things together. So that's what proximity means. It means we make sure that we put things together that are related, and we keep things far apart that are not related to each other. Okay. All right. So, little test for you here. So, obviously, we have 2 fabulous AFL teams here in South Australia, in Adelaide. Now, if I label these pictures, if I just put that in the middle there, you see I have not used proximity. So it's very difficult for you to tell which of these teams I support and which of those teams I do not support. Okay. So I have not used proximity there. You can see things, particularly things like labeling, you need to make sure that you have got things close together. So remember, things that are close together are related, things that are far apart are not related. Okay. So just on a side note, if you know anything about the rule of primacy, you will know which of those 2 teams I support. Okay, so primacy is about the fact that if you're dealing with Western readers, we start by reading in the top left-hand corner. So you put important stuff in the top left-hand corner, because that's where people look first if they are Western readers. Okay. All right, So that is essentially your CRAP design. So you've got contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. I'm just going to grab a couple of my postcards here to just show you this, because sometimes it's easier to see these things in, see practical examples of these. So let's just have a look at what I've got here. I should have organised this earlier, really, shouldn't I? Okay, let's just turn the camera back on. All right, so I have something here which is, so I've got this Moonlight Cinema one. I'm sure I've got some more, but I can't put my hand on it right now. So these Moonlight Cinema ones, they come out and they are, there is a whole group of them. So you can see we've got lovely contrast happening here. We've got lovely colour, so it really draws your eye to it. Whereas repetition goes, there's normally a series of these postcards. So the series of postcards will have they'll have the same branding. So there's repetition of this blue background and so on, but there'll be this sort of cartoon feel to them. And so that's repetition happening across the different postcards. When we look at alignment, we can see sort of on the back here, can you see we've got really nice, neat alignment going on here about sort of the dates and the film names and so on. And as for proximity, you've got some nice little lines going on between the months and so on. When we look at proximity here, you've got, this is the dates and where it is. We've got all of the logos are kept together at the bottom here. So that's pretty crap, that one. I've got one here as well. Now this came from a series of ones, so this is lovely use of white space, lovely use of contrast, that lovely green there. There was repetition because all of them have got this green bar and the grey bar, and this is about, let's say, lost something. And then on the back here, we've got, we've got a nice bit of alignment going on. And we've got proximity, these things are close together. And this was from a series of postcards. This is from the ATO. The Australian Tax Office could manage good design, people, so can we. So that was from a series as well. What else have I got here? This is a nice one. Who's your human rights hero? So there's a nice use of contrast because your eye is drawn to this sort of red, the cartoon part that's on there. We've got nice use of proximity and alignment going on in the back there as well. So again, quite crap. This one I'll give you, because this is just a bonus tip for you here. This is something that's used as well by a lot of designers, which is if you've got like a full photo like this, is to repeat a colour. So you see how we've got this red bucket here, and then they've used that red for the buried in bureaucracy. It just helps tie the whole thing together. So make sure that you're doing that. If you've got a photo, pick, and you can use, there's a colour dropper with PowerPoint, so you can just click on something and pick up the colour for your text and so on. So a nice use of humour as well. Humour is always welcome. So that's just a few examples of the CRAP design in action. By the way, as well, these postcards are really great because if you think about, particularly when you're talking about PowerPoint design, what you want essentially is that's what's on the slide, because that grabs people's attention, and then that is the bit that's in your notes. That bit says your notes at the bottom, that's the bit that's in your notes, so that's the bit that's coming out your mouth. Okay, all right, I'm just going to turn my video off again while we go on to the next bit. So CRAP design. Now you know about it, you will see it absolutely everywhere. Okay. Oh, hang on, what's going on here? Here we go. So next, let's talk about colours. So one of the things to think about in colours is that, sorry, I'll flip back, is that colours have meaning. So colours have social meaning. And if I say the colour red to you, there are certain things that come into your mind. And what those things are, so some of them are positive, some of them are negative. So, red might mean to you danger, it might mean love and passion. But it also depends on the culture you were raised in. So if you are raised in an Asian culture, then that would probably mean luck to you. So you do need to be careful when you're using colour, that if you're trying to use colour for meaning, just be aware that colour has different meanings in different cultures. So this is a wonderful drawing, an illustration from informationisbeautiful.net. Beautiful website. I suggest you go and have a look at it. This guy designs absolutely fabulous infographics. So he puts some really dense information into sort of graphic graphic interface, and they're just beautiful. So what's going on here is you can see the spokes of the wheel. So if you look at the wheel, it's got little letters on the spokes here, and they shows you up in that top right hand corner what they refer to, which culture they refer to, and then each of the sorry, so that's the wheels within the wheels. The spokes going around the outside, there are numbers, and those numbers are listed here. So you can see something like, what have we got here? We've got something like 63. What's 63? So 63 is peace. Okay, so 63. So you'll see that peace is all sorts of different colours and all sorts of different cultures. So we look through here, you know, it can be white, it can be yellow, it can be blue, and so on. So I advise you to go and have a look at this. It's really fascinating, but really what I'm trying to say to you is don't try to use color purely to get an emotional or a resonance, or you know, to try and get across a concept. You can't just use color, because it will mean different things in different cultures. Another thing to concern yourself with when you're using color is thinking about those people who suffer from color blindness. Now, color blindness is actually really common amongst men. It's about 1 in 12 men suffer from some form of colour blindness. Very rare in women, only 0.5% of women suffer from colour blindness. And the most common form of colour blindness, let me just show you what this looks like. So here we've got a map you may be familiar with. This is the tube map of London. It's a famous design piece, really trying to help people get around the tube map. And it is great for getting around the tube map. It's great for getting around the tube. Do not use it to navigate when you're on land, because this is not geographically accurate. Okay, but the tube map is, as I say, is a classic. Though you might notice on the top left-hand corner here, you've got this key. So you need to be able to read this key to be able to interpret the colours on the map. The names of the lines are not written anywhere on the map itself, so they are actually just only written in that key there. So that is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. The map looks like. Let me just show you what it now looks like to someone who suffers from the most common form of colour blindness. Okay, let me just reveal that. Okay, so you'll see that it sort of goes all yellow and brown now. So that's someone who suffers from red-green colour blindness. This is what they will see of the London tube map. So pretty much impossible to navigate your way around. Very difficult to interpret this key over on the top left-hand side now. So do be careful if you're using colour. Make sure that there are other ways for people to be able to interpret your data. There is a great website that you can go to, and you can upload your images and you can see what they would look like. So you can save your PowerPoint file or whatever else it is as an image, upload it to this website and see what it looks like to somebody who is colorblind. Or you can download, if you've got Photoshop or something like that, you can actually download an add-in for it as well. So make sure that you are concerning yourself with such things. Okay. Final thing that I want to talk, oh no, not the final thing. There's another couple of things I want to talk about. So the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is very popular in photography, but you can also use it in your graphic design, particularly in slide design. So the rule of thirds is about the fact that our eye we find it aesthetically pleasing when if you divide something into thirds, if the focus of that thing is along one of those third lines, or where they meet. Sorry, that was a really poor explanation of the rule of thirds. Look it up on Wikipedia. It's related to the golden ratio. So those maths geeks out there who know about the Fibonacci sequence and everything, the rule of thirds is there, and it's used a lot in art, in pottery and statuary, and you'll find the rule of thirds, the Fibonacci, sorry, the golden ratio happening all over our bodies and all that sort of thing. But in common parlance, let me show you what I'm talking about with the rule of thirds. I love this picture. I have no reason to use it, so I use it for this. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to divide this picture up into thirds, both horizontally and vertically. So if I do that, okay, so you can see that the focus of the picture is right where these two power lines, so these are called power lines, and this is actually called the power point where they meet. So hopefully you can see that the focus of the picture is right there where that power lines, where those that power point, where those power lines meet. Okay, It would be really easy to put her face right in the middle, but then it wouldn't be as powerful a picture. Our eyes are drawn into this. It seems to us more active than if it was in the middle. You might also notice that this sort of lovely green hut is sort of filling up 1/3 in the top there as well. So we like a bit of that. Let me just show you some other examples so you can see the rule of thirds in action. Okay, so if you have a look at this picture here, I'd like you to keep your eye on this horizon line. So you've got this horizon line here. If I bring in my thirds again, there you go. So you can see here that that horizon line is precisely on that third. Now, if you do a bit of amateur photography yourself, where you're on your holidays and you're taking some pictures and you're going, look at this beautiful landscape, and you take a picture, and when you look at the picture, you go, it's just not, it doesn't have the power. It doesn't really show me how beautiful that place was. You've probably put your horizon line right in the middle. So you've probably centered the horizon line in your field of vision. Have a go instead of putting the horizon line along this bottom, one of these third lines, so one of these power lines. Try putting it in that third, so try putting it on that grid, and you'll find you have much more dramatic photographs. There you go. You didn't know you were going to get photography tips today, did you? And if you have a digital camera, you probably can turn the grid on. You can probably turn this thirds grid on in your viewfinder. In fact, you might already have spent some time trying to turn it off, but now you know what it's for. All right. Oh, look at this. Disaster on so many levels. But let me just bring in those thirds again. Okay, you'll see how sweetly that this kisses that part of the glass there. Okay. So the rule of thirds in action. It just adds some drama. Let me just show you. So this is a woman here. She's very happy about something. And a couple of tips for you here. You'll notice that the photograph actually butts onto the very bottom of the slide. So if you do have anything that you're putting onto a slide, a photograph you're putting on the slide, make sure it reaches an edge, because otherwise she would just be floating there with no legs, and that would just look weird. But anyway, let's back to the rule of thirds. Just move her across there, and you'll notice now that her face, we've just got her right along that third, and it just adds some power there. What it also does, it opens up some of that white space we were talking about earlier. So I now have that white space, and I could do something like I could pick up the pink of her lipstick, or maybe the brown of her beads, or the grey of her top, and I could put a little bit of text in that sort of top left-hand corner there. So that's the rule of thirds. Just one more thing to talk about before I'm going to show you some ways that you can find inspiration. Is visual cliches. So what do I mean by visual cliche? I mean, light bulbs for ideas and things like that. This is one of my favorites. This is, partnership. If it had a globe behind it, it would be global partnership. This drives people like me crazy. It's just so dull. It doesn't speak to me. This isn't a particularly good photograph. I mean, I can think of other photographs that could be hand holding, could be partnership. I have a lovely old black and white photo of two really old hands with wedding rings on them holding each other, or something like that. But it's just blare. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't add to the message. It doesn't really do much. It's just a visual cliche. So there's a whole bunch. I'm sure you can think of lots of visual cliches. Try to avoid them. And it's what you want to do as well, if you're going to do so, all of the images that I'm using today, I purchased from iStock, so iStockphoto.com, and so if I go looking for something on partnership, I will brainstorm first. So I will think to myself, how do I want to represent partnership? So you could do things like you do salt and pepper, or Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, or you could do all sorts of different ways that you could represent partnership. And what I would do then is I would search for that. So if you type partnership into an image search like iStock, what you're going to come back with is like 10,000 pages of this, and this is rubbish. We've all seen it before. So try and avoid your visual cliches. I'll just show you some examples of presentation. When I used to help people create their presentations, I'll show you some images that I've used, because there's nothing wrong with a bit of drama. Okay. So sometimes you can represent what you're trying to talk about with the opposite. So we used this in a presentation where the slide was all about customer service. And I just love this because you can imagine if you think of customer service, I immediately picture the Amy woman with the headphones on and sort of smiling lovely. But instead, I love this picture. It adds a bit of humour. There's nothing wrong with humour, and it's just a beautiful picture. There's the lovely rings in the eyes and so on. It's just got real drama to it. So and as I say, it's just that little moment of amusement. So you can sometimes illustrate things with the opposite of what you're trying to say. Okay. So I use this and this is partnership. So that's the kind of partnership I want to get involved in. All right, it's much more than those hands shaking. So it really, again, it's a beautiful use of drama, some really lovely deep colours. What we actually did is I used the red from her rose. So I used the red from her rose and I put that as a bar across the top, and I used white text to actually sort of discuss some stuff, put some words up there about the partnership. But I do love it when I used to give clients sort of 2 or 3 pictures to choose from, and I always loved it when they picked the right one. And then we've got this one here. Now I was asked by people, well, when am I allowed to use text? Because you always say, Lucy, in presentations, I shouldn't have too much text. When am I allowed? And so I use this slide to say, well, you can use text when it has impact. So what this sort of illustrates is that idea that you can use images to create a sense of anticipation. Humans are curious creatures. So if you have something that's slightly obscure, but it still needs to link to your point, people will want to know how it relates to what you're going to say. They'll be like, what on earth is that about? And they sort of do that metaphorical leaning forward in their chair. So it's good to have a little bit of anticipation in there. Okay. All right. So that's what I wanted to talk about there. So that's some graphic design basics for you. Now I'd like to talk about getting some inspiration. So yeah, we talked about crap design, we talked about use of colours, we talked about the rule of thirds, and we talked there about using visual cliches. So I did a quick search in the library for graphic design, and I've narrowed it down just to books, and there are still, what was it? There was like thousands of the things. Oh, there you go, 16,000. 16,000. Okay. Now, when we look at here, there's some really interesting looking ones. So feel free to go and have a look at those in the diary, in the library. I think there's this, here you go, using strategies for graphic design to improve teaching and learning. I'll certainly be getting that out of the library. Thou shalt not use Comic Sans. I'm looking forward to having a look at looking at that one as well. So yeah. Stop, think, go, do, how typography and graphic design influences behavior. Yeah, I think that's just something we've not really touched on. Graphic design is important. It may seem frivolous, but it actually really helps. If it helps get your message across and you have an important message, then it is not frivolous. Okay? Doing good design helps people. There's been research done as well, things like website design, that if it's bad design, you lose your authority. People don't trust bad design. They don't realize they're doing it. It's not necessarily a conscious thing, but graphic design is important. So go check out all the great resources in the library. We also have, just sort of Google graphic design, put into the search engine of your choice things like graphic design inspiration. So I found this place called Inspiration Grid, and that will take us through to go and look at some other examples of graphic design. So it's got quite a lot of stuff in there you could look at. There are some great people out there, particularly when you're talking about presentations. So Gar Reynolds, who writes the most read blog about presentations on the internet, Presentation Zen. So here's this great blog here. He's also got some really good books. So Presentation Zen, Presentation Design, Naked Presentations. He's done some TED Talks and so on. So there's some really great stuff to read in here that really helps with. He does talk about graphic design. It is in the context of giving presentations, but I think you can take a lot of inspiration from that to your other design work as well. There is also the Presentation Studio. So Emma is based in Sydney. This is a studio, so she's just got a book out called Visual Thinking, which I didn't know until I looked at this today. But yeah, so there's some really interesting here. Some information about that. There's a blog, but there's also then presentation examples, so you can go in and you can have a little bit of inspiration there. There is, of course, TED. So not only does TED there are TED Talks about design and about sort of presenting information and information design that are also just watching any of the talks, do that meta thing that when you're watching a TED Talk about any topic that you want, just have a look at the way they're using graphic design, particularly in their slides. I know I'm talking a lot about presentations here, but you can pick up that inspiration for other things as well. And other than that too, of course, we do also have, we do also have, so all of these things like these, these postcards I've been showing you all about different bits and bobs, these great ones here. There's another great one there. This is one of my favorites. Because when I used to take this, I used to take these around to help people understand graphic design, and men would always pick this up, right? And it's actually about equal pay day, and it's the 18% sale, because on average women earn 18% less than men when this postcard was produced anyway. But they've used a car in it, so the men pick it up. Great, because it's the men we need to talk to about that stuff, right? We've got some stuff here. We've got this is quite busy, but it's supposed to be busy because it's all about the screen one. We've got, we've got one of those ones. We've got online stuff. We've got, this is one of my favorites as well. So yeah, have a look at the, isn't that true? So have a look at these kind of postcards as well. It's a great way to find inspiration. All right. So that brings us to the end of the graphic design's basics. As I said, there is this spectrum of graphic design. I'm not going to get you all the way up to the top, but hopefully we can move you a little bit along that journey so your work looks less graphic design, less non-designed. So remember the CRAP principles. Remember white space. So CRAP: contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity. Remember that white space. White space is one of the most important things that will make your work look more designed, less non-designed, if you like. Think about your color. Think about that rule of thirds, so where your placement of things, and the rule of thirds, working to the grid as well. So working to grids. I showed you a 3x3 grid. Grids can come in any shape and size, so 4x8, all sorts of different things. Look for them in magazines, you'll see them. Try to avoid your visual cliches. It's really worth getting in a room get a couple of people in a room if you want to, and do some brainstorming, about how could I represent this concept, this concept of innovation. I don't want to use a light bulb, so get some people in a room and talking about how you could represent innovation that's not a light bulb, right? So try to avoid those, and then look at all of the inspiration that's around you. There's graphic design absolutely everywhere, so maybe start collecting a little sort of mood board, if you like, or start doing some different things. Just start to collect them up, and you will build up build up a collection, if you like, of inspiration. Okay. And then just start flexing those graphic design muscles. Yeah, just start having a go, and it's an iterative process, I find. So I will do something and I'll go, oh, that's not very good, and then it'll get better and better and better, and then eventually I'll come up with something that's, hey, it's never that brilliant, but hopefully it's not, as I say, doesn't look too obviously non-designed. All right, well, I'm just going to launch a quick poll because we'd be really interested to know what you think of the presentation that you saw, the webinar that we did today. So let me just launch that. And I will say to you all, if you've got any questions, please just type those in now. But we hope that you have a really fun, restive and festive time over the break, and that you can come back to uni refreshed in the new year in 2018. We will be back on the 23rd of January. We're going to be talking about printing Excel spreadsheets. We've got another couple lined up as well. So we've got one on match and index, which is sort of VLOOKUP. So it's a follow-up to that VLOOKUP one that we did earlier in the year. And we've got another one booked as well. I can't, sorry, it's poof, it's gone. But yeah, if you would like to see anything else, please let us know, it.training@adelaide.edu.au. We would love to hear it. But other than that, thank you very much for joining us over 2017, and we hope to see you in 2018. I've not got anybody asking any questions. Let me just end that poll. Okay. All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we will see you in the new year. Bye. Bye.